In a quiet little town surrounded by vast fields and endless skies, there stood a small diner named the Cozy Corner. It wasn't fancy or modern. It had chipped paint on its walls, mismatched chairs, and a faint smell of coffee that lingered in every corner. But despite its worn-out appearance, it was a place where people came not just for food but for warmth and comfort. And much of that warmth came from one person, Maggie. Maggie was in her late 20s with curly brown hair that always seemed to escape her bun, no matter how tightly she tied it. Her uniform, a faded blue apron over a white shirt, was often stained with ketchup or grease, but she didn't mind. She worked hard because this job meant everything to her. Without it, she wouldn't be able to send money back home to her sick mother, who lived miles away in another state. Life hadn't been kind to Maggie, but she never let bitterness take root in her heart. Instead, she poured all her energy into helping others, even when it left her exhausted. One chilly winter evening, as the sun began to set and painted the sky in shades of orange and purple, the Cozy Corner was unusually quiet. Most customers had already left, leaving only a few scattered tables occupied. Maggie moved around the diner, wiping down counters and refilling salt shakers, humming softly to herself. It was almost closing time, and she couldn't wait to sit down for a moment and rest her aching feet. Just as she was about to lock the door, 4 figures appeared outside the window. They were children, 2 boys and 2 girls, all bundled up in thin jackets far too light for the freezing weather. Their faces were pale, their eyes wide with uncertainty. They hesitated at the entrance, glancing nervously at each other before finally stepping inside. The cold draft followed them in, making the hanging bell above the door jingle softly. Maggie stopped what she was doing and turned to look at them. "Can I help you?" she asked warmly, trying to mask the concern growing in her chest. Something about these kids felt off. They looked lost, scared, and incredibly hungry. The oldest boy, maybe 10 years old, stepped forward timidly. His voice trembled as he spoke. We're sorry to bother you. We just wanted to know if—" He trailed off, looking down at his scuffed shoes. "If you've got anything to eat," the youngest girl finished for him. She couldn't have been more than 5, her tiny hands clutching a tattered stuffed rabbit close to her chest. Maggie's heart sank. She could see the desperation in their eyes, the way they shifted uncomfortably as though afraid someone might yell at them to leave. She crouched down to their level, forcing a reassuring smile onto her face. "Of course, sweethearts. Come on in. Let's get you warmed up first, okay?" She led them to a booth near the heater and grabbed a couple of blankets from the storage closet. As she wrapped the blankets around their trembling shoulders, she noticed how thin they were under their clothes. Hunger lines etched their faces, and their cheeks were flushed from the biting wind outside. Maggie felt a lump rise in her throat. These kids weren't just cold, they were starving. Without wasting another second, she hurried to the kitchen. "Hey, Joe," she called out to the cook, who was busy cleaning up. "Can you whip up some burgers and fries on the house?" Joe raised an eyebrow, but nodded knowingly. He'd seen Maggie do things like this before. She had a habit of sneaking free meals to people in need, even though she barely earned enough to cover her own expenses. Still, no one questioned her motives. Everyone knew Maggie was the kind of person who gave until she had nothing left to give. As the food sizzled on the grill, Maggie returned to the table where the children sat huddled together. She knelt beside them, her voice gentle. "So what are your names?" The oldest boy introduced himself as Liam, while the younger boy said his name was Noah. The 2 girls were twins, Emma and Sophie. When Maggie asked about their parents, the room fell silent. After a long pause, Liam muttered, "They're gone." It didn't take long for Maggie to piece together the truth. These kids were orphans, fending for themselves in a world that rarely noticed them. Her chest tightened at the thought of what they must have endured. How many nights had they gone without food? How many times had they slept in the freezing cold? When Joe brought out the plates of steaming hot food, the children's eyes lit up like stars. Maggie watched as they dug in hungrily, their earlier shyness replaced by gratitude. She stayed with them, chatting lightly to make them feel comfortable. She told them silly jokes and funny stories from her childhood, hoping to distract them from their hardships, even if just for a little while. What Maggie didn't realize was that someone else was watching her too. Upstairs, in a small office above the diner, Mr. Grayson sat hunched over a monitor. The cameras installed throughout the diner allowed him to keep an eye on things, ensuring smooth operations during busy hours. But tonight, his attention wasn't on the cash register or the kitchen staff. It was on Maggie. Mr. Grayson was a tall, stern-looking man in his 50s with sharp features and piercing gray eyes that made most employees uncomfortable. He rarely smiled and kept to himself, preferring solitude over company. Yet, there was something about Maggie that intrigued him. Unlike everyone else, she treated him with genuine kindness, greeting him cheerfully every morning and thanking him sincerely whenever he complimented her work. Even now, as he observed her caring for the children, he found himself unable to look away. Her actions reminded him of a memory buried deep within him, a memory of a time when he too had been hungry and alone. Back then, a stranger had shown him compassion, offering him a warm meal and a place to sleep for the night. That single act of kindness had changed his life forever. Watching Maggie care for those kids stirred emotions he hadn't felt in years. For the first time in a long while, Mr. Grayson felt a spark of curiosity ignite within him. Who was this woman who gave so freely even when she had so little? What drove her to put others before herself? And why did her selflessness resonate so deeply with him? As the children finished their meal and thanked Maggie profusely, she handed them a small bag filled with snacks and a few dollars from her tip jar. "Take this," she said softly, "just in case you need something later." Liam hesitated, shaking his head. "We can't accept this." "Yes, you can," Maggie insisted firmly, placing the bag in his hands. "Promise me you'll use it wisely, okay?" The kids nodded, their eyes shining with tears they tried to hide. Before leaving, Emma hugged Maggie tightly, whispering, "Thank you for being so nice." Maggie blinked back her own tears as she watched them step out into the night. She didn't know where they were going or what tomorrow held for them, but she hoped her small gesture would bring them some comfort. Back in his office, Mr. Grayson leaned back in his chair, his mind racing. He had always prided himself on being a practical man focused solely on business. But tonight Maggie had shown him something he hadn't expected: hope. For reasons he couldn't yet explain, he decided to keep a closer watch on her. Whatever happened next, he knew one thing for sure: Maggie was different. And perhaps, just perhaps, she might inspire change, not just in him but in the world around them. The next morning, Maggie woke up with a sense of purpose that hadn't been there in weeks. Despite the weight of her own struggles, her mounting bills, her mother's medical expenses, and the constant worry about making ends meet, she felt lighter. Helping those 4 children had reminded her why she loved working at the Cozy Corner. It wasn't just about earning a paycheck, it was about being part of something bigger than herself. Every smile she coaxed from a customer, every warm meal she served, it all mattered. As she walked to work through the crisp winter air, her breath forming small clouds in front of her, Maggie couldn't stop thinking about Liam, Noah, Emma, and Sophie. Where were they now? Were they safe? Had they found shelter for the night? She wished she could do more for them, but what else could she offer when she barely had enough for herself? Still, she resolved to keep an eye out for them. If fate brought them back into her life, she would help again, without hesitation. When Maggie arrived at the diner, everything seemed normal, at least at first glance. Joe was already in the kitchen prepping ingredients, and a few early customers sat nursing cups of coffee. But as soon as Maggie stepped behind the counter, she noticed Mr. Grayson standing near the register. His arms were crossed, his expression unreadable. Maggie froze for a moment, unsure of what to expect. He rarely came downstairs during busy hours unless something was wrong. "Maggie," he said gruffly, nodding toward his office upstairs. "I need to speak with you." Her stomach dropped. Had someone complained about her giving away free food last night? Or worse, had Mr. Grayson seen her slip money to the kids? For a fleeting second, panic gripped her heart. What if this cost her the job she desperately needed? Taking a deep breath, Maggie followed him upstairs. The office was small and cluttered, with stacks of paperwork covering the desk and a single monitor displaying live footage from the diner's security cameras. Mr. Grayson gestured for her to sit, which only made her anxiety grow. He never invited anyone to sit during these meetings. They usually involved scolding or reprimands. To her surprise, Mr. Grayson didn't start yelling. Instead, he reached into his drawer and pulled out an envelope. Without saying a word, he placed it on the desk in front of her. Maggie stared at it, confused. "What's this?" she asked cautiously. "Open it," he replied, his tone neutral. With trembling hands, Maggie opened the envelope and gasped. Inside was a thick wad of cash, $500 to be exact. Her eyes widened in disbelief. "Mr. Grayson, I don't understand." "It's yours," he said simply. "But there's a catch." Maggie's heart sank. Of course there was a catch. Nothing good ever came without strings attached, especially not from someone like Mr. Grayson. She braced herself for whatever demand he was about to make. "I want you to use this money to help someone else," he continued. "Not yourself. Someone who needs it more than you do." Maggie blinked, stunned. Was this some kind of test? A trick? She searched his face for answers, but his expression remained impassive. "Help someone else?" she repeated slowly. "Like charity?" "Yes," he confirmed. "You have 1 week. If you succeed, if you truly make a difference, I'll reward you further. But if you fail—" He paused, letting the threat hang in the air. "Your job will be on the line." For a moment, Maggie didn't know how to respond. On one hand, $500 was more money than she'd seen in months. It could ease so many of her burdens, pay off some debt, buy groceries, maybe even send extra cash to her mom. But on the other hand, using it to help someone else felt almost instinctive. To her, that's what she did best after all. Giving was second nature to Maggie, even when it left her empty-handed. Finally, she nodded. "Okay, I'll do it." Mr. Grayson studied her carefully, as though trying to gauge whether she was sincere. Then, without another word, he dismissed her. As Maggie returned to the diner floor, her mind raced. Who should she help? How could she possibly decide? And why had Mr. Grayson given her this task in the first place? Over the next few days, Maggie wrestled with the decision. She thought about her mother, who relied on her support. She thought about her neighbors, struggling to keep their homes heated during the brutal winter. She even considered donating the money to a local shelter. But none of those options felt quite right. Something inside her told her to wait, to trust that the right opportunity would present itself. Then, 3 days later, it happened. Maggie was walking home after a long shift when she spotted 4 familiar figures huddled under a flickering street lamp. It was Liam, Noah, Emma, and Sophie, the same children she'd fed at the diner. They looked even worse than before, their thin jackets barely shielding them from the biting cold. Their faces were pale, their eyes hollow with exhaustion. Without hesitation, Maggie approached them. "Hey, guys," she said softly, crouching down to their level. "What are you doing out here?" Liam glanced up, surprised to see her. Maggie? From the diner?" "That's me," she replied with a small smile. "Are you okay? Do you have somewhere warm to stay?" The kids exchanged uneasy glances. Finally, Liam shook his head. "No, we've been staying in an old building downtown, but it's freezing. There's no heat and we're scared someone might kick us out." Maggie's heart broke hearing this. These children had lost everything: parents, stability, safety, and now they were living like ghosts, invisible to the world around them. She knew then exactly what she had to do with the money. The very next day, Maggie began putting Mr. Grayson's challenge into action. First, she rented a tiny 1-bedroom apartment for the kids using part of the cash. It wasn't much, a cramped space with peeling wallpaper and creaky floors, but it had heat and running water, and most importantly, it was safe. Next, she bought essentials: blankets, pillows, basic furniture, and groceries to stock the cupboards. She even arranged for a prepaid phone so they could call her if they needed anything. But Maggie didn't stop there. Knowing that temporary solutions wouldn't solve their problems, she reached out to local charities and social services. She spent hours filling out forms, making phone calls, and advocating on their behalf. She explained their situation to caseworkers, emphasizing how important it was to keep the siblings together. Her persistence paid off when a foster care agency agreed to take them in temporarily while they worked on finding a permanent placement. Throughout this process, Maggie visited the kids regularly, bringing them snacks, books, and toys to brighten their days. She listened to their stories, laughed at their jokes, and assured them that things would get better. Slowly but surely, she began to see hope return to their eyes. Meanwhile, unbeknownst to Maggie, Mr. Grayson continued to observe her every move. Through private investigators, he learned more about the children's tragic backstory. Their parents had died in a car accident months earlier, leaving them orphaned and alone. Their story struck a chord deep within him. It reminded him of his own childhood, when he and his younger siblings had faced similar hardships after losing their father. Back then, they had relied on the kindness of strangers to survive. Watching Maggie fight tirelessly for these kids stirred emotions in Mr. Grayson that he hadn't felt in years. He admired her determination, her compassion, her unwavering belief that people deserved second chances. For the first time in decades, he allowed himself to imagine what it might feel like to reconnect with his surviving sibling, a sister he hadn't spoken to since their teenage years. Perhaps, he thought, it wasn't too late to mend those broken. As by the end of the week, Maggie had accomplished far more than Mr. Grayson had expected. Not only had she provided immediate relief for the children, but she had also set them on a path toward a brighter future. When she reported back to him, explaining everything she had done with the money, Mr. Grayson couldn't hide his astonishment. "You've exceeded my expectations," he admitted gruffly, handing her another envelope, this time containing double the amount she had started with. "Take this. Use it however you see fit." Maggie accepted the gift with gratitude, though she already knew what she would do with it. Some would go toward continuing to support Liam, Noah, Emma, and Sophie, while the rest would fund new initiatives at the Cozy Corner. Inspired by Maggie's example, Mr. Grayson decided to transform the diner into a hub for charitable efforts, offering free meals to those in need and hosting fundraisers for local organizations. Little by little, the once quiet diner became a beacon of hope in the community, and at the center of it all stood Maggie, kind, resilient, and determined to prove that even in the darkest times, acts of generosity could light the way forward. Maggie's days became a whirlwind of activity. Between her shifts at the Cozy Corner, visiting the 4 children, and coordinating with social workers, she barely had time to sleep. Yet despite the exhaustion, she felt alive in a way she hadn't in years. Every small victory, the smile on Emma's face when she brought her a coloring book, the relief in Liam's voice when he learned they wouldn't be separated, filled her with a sense of purpose. For the first time, Maggie realized that helping others wasn't just something she did out of kindness. It was who she was. But as much as she poured herself into caring for the children, a nagging thought lingered in the back of her mind. Mr. Grayson. Why had he given her that money? What did he want from her? Was this some sort of elaborate test? Or worse, was he trying to control her life? These questions haunted her, but she pushed them aside, focusing instead on the task at hand. Whatever his motives, she decided they didn't matter. What mattered was making sure Liam, Noah, Emma, and Sophie were safe and cared for. One evening, after another long day of juggling responsibilities, Maggie returned to the diner to pick up her tips before heading home. As she counted the crumpled bills in her apron pocket, Mr. Grayson appeared unexpectedly. His presence startled her, and she nearly dropped the money. "Everything go smoothly today?" he asked, his tone casual but his eyes sharp. Maggie nodded quickly, tucking the cash into her bag. "Yes, sir. Slow afternoon, but we managed." He studied her for a moment, then gestured toward the booth where she'd fed the children days earlier. "Sit with me for a minute." Her stomach tightened. This was unusual. Mr. Grayson rarely engaged in personal conversations with employees. Still, she obeyed, sliding into the booth across from him. Up close, she noticed how weary he looked, as though carrying a weight no one else could see. "I've been watching you," he said bluntly, cutting straight to the point. "You've done well with those kids." Maggie blinked, unsure how to respond. "Thank you, I guess. They're good kids. They deserve better than what life has handed them." Mr. Grayson leaned back, folding his arms across his chest. "Do you ever wonder why I gave you that money?" The question caught her off guard. She hesitated, choosing her words carefully. "I assumed it was a challenge, to see if I could help someone without keeping it for myself." A faint smirk crossed his lips. "Smart girl. But there's more to it than that." He paused, staring out the window at the darkening sky. When he spoke again, his voice carried a note of vulnerability Maggie had never heard before. "When I was your age, my family fell apart. My father died suddenly, leaving my mother to raise 5 kids on her own. We didn't have much, barely enough to eat most nights. One winter, when things got really bad, a stranger helped us. He gave us food, blankets, even a place to stay for a few weeks. That act of kindness saved us." Maggie listened intently, her heart softening toward the man sitting across from her. She'd always seen him as stern and unapproachable, but now she glimpsed something deeper, a man shaped by loss and hardship, clinging to fragments of hope. "That memory stayed with me," Mr. Grayson continued. "For years, I wondered if I'd ever have the chance to pay it forward. Then I saw you feeding those kids the other night. I saw the same compassion in you that I remembered from that stranger all those years ago." His confession left Maggie speechless. She hadn't expected this, to discover that beneath his tough exterior lay a man searching for redemption. It made her view him in a completely different light. "So, this whole thing," she began hesitantly, gesturing vaguely between them. "Was it just about testing me, or is there something else?" "Is there?" Mr. Grayson sighed, running a hand through his graying hair. "Partly, yes, it was a test. I wanted to see if you were truly selfless, or if you'd crack under pressure. But it's also about something bigger. You remind me of who I used to be before bitterness took over, before I shut everyone out." There was a raw honesty in his words that struck Maggie deeply. She understood loneliness better than most people. After all, she'd spent countless nights worrying about her mom, feeling like the world was closing in around her. And yet, here was Mr. Grayson, admitting to his own pain. It created an unexpected bond between them, a shared understanding of struggle and resilience. "What happens now?" Maggie asked quietly. He smiled faintly, a rare expression that softened his usually harsh features. "Now you keep doing what you're doing. Keep fighting for those kids, and anyone else who needs your help. And maybe I'll try to do the same." Over the next few days, Maggie noticed subtle changes in Mr. Grayson. He started showing up more often on the diner floor, chatting with customers and employees alike. He even joined in during the lunch rush, bussing tables and refilling coffee cups. While his demeanor remained reserved, there was a newfound warmth in his interactions, a willingness to connect that hadn't been there before. Meanwhile, Maggie continued working tirelessly to secure a stable future for Liam, Noah, Emma, and Sophie. With the additional funds Mr. Grayson had given her, she purchased school supplies, winter coats, and sturdy shoes for the children. She arranged for tutoring sessions to help them catch up academically, and signed them up for extracurricular activities to give them a sense of normalcy. Each step forward felt like a triumph, not just for the kids, but for Maggie, too. She saw their progress as proof that kindness could ripple outward, touching lives in ways she couldn't have imagined. As word spread about Maggie's efforts, the community rallied behind her. Regulars at the Cozy Corner began donating clothes, toys, and canned goods which Maggie distributed to families in need. Local businesses offered discounts on groceries and utilities, easing the burden on struggling households. Even Joe, the cook, pitched in by preparing extra meals each night for Maggie to deliver to shelters and soup kitchens. Through it all, Maggie remained humble, deflecting praise whenever it came her way. "I'm just doing what anyone would do," she insisted repeatedly. But deep down she knew that wasn't entirely true. Not everyone would have gone to such lengths. Not everyone possessed the same boundless empathy and determination that drove her forward. And then, one crisp morning, something remarkable happened. As Maggie unlocked the diner's door, ready to start another busy day, she spotted a familiar figure waiting outside. It was a woman in her late 50s, her hair streaked with gray and her eyes filled with tears. She introduced herself as Mrs. Harper, Liam and Noah's aunt. "I don't know how to thank you," Mrs. Harper said, her voice trembling. "When I heard about the kids, I couldn't believe it. I live out of state and haven't seen them in years, but I want to take them in. Give them a real home." Maggie's heart swelled with joy. All her hard work, all the sleepless nights and endless phone calls, it had led to this moment. The children finally had a chance at stability, surrounded by family who loved them. Later that week, Maggie shared the news with Mr. Grayson. To her surprise, he seemed genuinely moved. "You've done something extraordinary," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "Something I'm not sure I could have done." She shook her head modestly. "It wasn't just me. Everyone played a part, the community, the charities, even Hugh." His gaze softened, and for the first time Maggie saw gratitude in his eyes. "Maybe," he admitted, "but none of it would have happened without you. You're a force to be reckoned with, Maggie." Those words stayed with her long after their conversation ended. They reminded her that while life was full of challenges, it was also brimming with opportunities to make a difference. Opportunities to reach out, to lift others up, to create ripples of hope that extended far beyond what she could see. As Maggie stood behind the counter later that day, serving plates of pancakes and pouring cups of coffee, she felt a profound sense of fulfillment. The diner buzzed with laughter and chatter, a testament to the connections forged within its walls. And somewhere in the background, she could almost hear the echoes of Mr. Grayson's past kindnesses and the promise of new beginnings yet to come. The transformation in Maggie's life and in the cozy corner itself was nothing short of remarkable. What had once been a simple diner serving cheap meals to locals was now becoming something much more, a beacon of hope for the entire community. Under Maggie's guidance, the diner became a hub of kindness and generosity. Every day brought new stories of people helping each other, inspired by her example. For Liam, Noah, Emma, and Sophie, the changes were even more profound. Their aunt, Mrs. Harper, moved quickly to bring them into her home. She rented a modest house not far from the diner, ensuring they could stay close to the place and the person who had changed their lives. Maggie visited them often, bringing books, games, and homemade treats. Each visit felt like a reunion, filled with laughter and gratitude. The kids were thriving, slowly healing from the trauma of losing their parents and finding stability in their new life. But Maggie wasn't the only one growing through these experiences. Mr. Grayson, too, was undergoing a quiet revolution within himself. Watching Maggie's relentless dedication to helping others stirred memories he'd buried long ago. He thought about his siblings, his brothers and sister who had scattered across the country after their father's death. For decades, he had cut ties with everyone, convinced that relying on others only led to disappointment. But now, seeing how Maggie embraced connection and community, he began to question whether he had made the right choice all those years ago. One evening, after closing time at the diner, Maggie found Mr. Grayson sitting alone at a corner table. His usual stern expression was replaced by something softer, almost vulnerable. Curious, she approached him cautiously. "Everything okay, Mr. Grayson?" she asked gently. He looked up, startled by her presence. Then, after a moment's hesitation, he nodded toward the seat across from him. "Sit down, Maggie. There's something I need to tell you." Maggie obeyed, sensing that whatever he wanted to say was important. As she settled into the chair, he took a deep breath as if steeling himself for what came next. "I've been doing some thinking," he began slowly, "about my past, about my family." Her eyes widened slightly, but she remained silent, letting him continue at his own pace. When my father died, we lost everything. Our home, our sense of security. My mother tried her best, but it wasn't enough. We drifted apart over the years, and eventually I pushed everyone away. I told myself I didn't need anyone, that being alone was safer. He paused, his voice thick with emotion. But watching you, how you care for those kids, how you inspire this whole community, it makes me realize how wrong I was. Maybe it's not too late to fix things. Maggie reached across the table, placing a comforting hand on his arm. It's never too late, Mr. Grayson. Trust me, I know how hard it can be to reach out, but it's worth it. Family is precious. Even when they're imperfect, they're still family. Her words struck a chord deep within him. For the first time in years, he allowed himself to consider reconnecting with his surviving sibling, a younger sister named Clara, whom he hadn't spoken to since they were teenagers. It wouldn't be easy. Decades of silence had built walls between them. But Maggie's unwavering belief in second chances gave him the courage to try. Over the next few weeks, Mr. Grayson took small steps toward reconciliation. With Maggie's encouragement, he wrote a letter to Clara, pouring his heart onto the page. He apologized for shutting her out, explained why he had done it, and expressed his desire to rebuild their relationship. To his surprise, Clara responded, almost immediately. Her reply was warm and forgiving, filled with memories of their childhood and a longing to reconnect. Their correspondence grew frequent, and soon, they arranged to meet in person. When the day finally arrived, Maggie accompanied Mr. Grayson to the train station. She stood beside him as he waited anxiously on the platform, clutching a bouquet of flowers. When Clara stepped off the train, there was no mistaking the resemblance between them. Both had the same piercing gray eyes and sharp features, though Clara's face softened with a smile that lit up the entire station. The reunion was emotional, filled with tears and laughter. Maggie watched from a distance, feeling privileged to witness such a powerful moment of healing. Later, over coffee at the cozy corner, Clara thanked Maggie for encouraging her brother to reach out. "You've given us a second chance," she said sincerely. "We owe you so much." As the weeks turned into months, the bond between Maggie and Mr. Grayson continued to deepen. No longer just employer and employee, they became friends, partners in creating positive change. Together, they transformed the cozy corner into a true community center. They hosted weekly dinners for families in need, organized clothing drives, and even started a scholarship fund for local students. The diner buzzed with activity, its walls adorned with photos of smiling faces and heartfelt thank you notes. Through it all, Maggie remained humble, deflecting praise whenever it came her way. "I'm just one person," she would say with a shrug. "It's everyone working together that makes the difference." Yet, despite her modesty, Maggie couldn't deny the impact she'd had, not just on the children she'd helped or the community she'd inspired, but on Mr. Grayson as well. He had gone from a distant, intimidating figure to someone who genuinely cared about others. He laughed more, smiled more, and opened his heart to the world around him. And while he still had moments of gruffness, they were tempered by a newfound warmth that endeared him to everyone who knew him. One chilly December evening, as snowflakes danced outside the diner's windows, Maggie stood behind the counter reflecting on how far they'd come. The cozy corner was packed with customers enjoying hot cocoa and holiday treats. Children decorated gingerbread cookies at a nearby table, their laughter filling the air. In the corner, Mr. Grayson sat chatting with Clara, their heads bent close, as they shared old stories and new dreams. Maggie felt a surge of gratitude for the strangers who had become family, for the hardships that had taught her resilience, and for the simple joy of making a difference. Life wasn't perfect, and challenges still loomed ahead. But surrounded by love and purpose, she knew she could face anything. That night, as she locked up the diner and headed home, Maggie glanced back at the glowing sign above the door. The Cozy Corner had always been more than just a name. It was a promise, a reminder that even in the coldest, darkest times there was warmth to be found if you looked in the right places. And for Maggie, that warmth came from the connections she'd forged, the lives she'd touched, and the hope she'd ignited in hearts that had once felt lost. Little did she know, however, that the story of the Cozy Corner, and her role in it, was far from over. For every act of kindness creates ripples unseen but powerful, spreading farther than anyone could imagine. And somewhere in the distance, those ripples were already beginning to shape the next chapter of her journey. The months that followed were transformative, not just for Maggie and Mr. Grayson, but for the entire town. The Cozy Corner had become more than a diner. It was now a symbol of hope, generosity, and unity. People from all walks of life came together, under its roof, drawn by the spirit of kindness that permeated every corner. What started as Maggie's quiet acts of compassion had sparked something much larger. A movement. Liam, Noah, Emma, and Sophie thrived in their new home with Aunt Clara. They attended school regularly, made friends, and began to heal from the trauma of losing their parents. Their laughter echoed through the halls of their modest house, filling it with warmth and life. Maggie visited them often, bringing homemade cookies or sitting with them to help with homework. Each visit reinforced her belief that even the smallest gestures could change lives forever. But the children weren't the only ones who benefited from Maggie's efforts. The diner itself had evolved into a hub of charitable activities. Every Saturday morning, volunteers gathered to prepare meals for families struggling to make ends meet. Local businesses donated ingredients, while high school students earned community service hours by serving food and cleaning up afterward. It wasn't uncommon to see lines stretching out the door, with people waiting patiently for a hot meal and a kind word. Maggie's relationship with Mr. Grayson continued to grow stronger. He had embraced his role as a mentor and benefactor, using his resources to support the initiatives she spearheaded. Together, they launched a scholarship program for local students, funded entirely by donations collected at the diner. The first recipient was a bright young girl named Maria, whose dream of becoming a doctor seemed impossible until Maggie and Mr. Grayson stepped in to help. When Maria tearfully thanked them during an awards ceremony, Maggie felt a lump rise in her throat. This was what it meant to create opportunities to give someone a chance to rewrite their future. As winter melted into spring, the diner underwent physical changes as well, with funds raised through fundraisers and contributions from grateful patrons. They renovated the space. Bright yellow paint replaced the chipped walls, mismatched chairs were swapped for sturdy wooden ones, and fresh flowers adorned each table. A mural painted by local artists covered one wall, depicting scenes of community and connection. At the center of the mural stood a figure resembling Maggie, arms outstretched as if welcoming everyone inside. Yet amidst all the progress, there were still moments of reflection. One evening, after closing time, Maggie sat alone at a booth, sipping tea. She thought about how far she'd come since that fateful night when 4 hungry children walked into the diner. Back then, she had no idea her simple act of kindness would set off such a chain reaction. Now, looking around at the transformed space, she marveled at how interconnected everything was. Her decision to feed those kids had led to friendships, reunions, and countless other acts of goodwill. Just as she was lost in thought, Mr. Grayson joined her, sliding into the seat across the table. He carried 2 steaming mugs of coffee and placed one in front of her. "You look like you're deep in thought," he said, his tone lighter than it used to be. "I was just thinking about how everything has changed," Maggie replied, wrapping her hands around the warm mug. "It's hard to believe this all started with 4 kids and a plate of burgers." Mr. Grayson chuckled softly. "Sometimes the smallest actions have the biggest impact. Look at us, we're proof of that." She smiled, nodding in agreement. Then, after a pause, she asked, "Do you ever wonder what's next? I mean, we've done so much already, but there's always more work to do." He leaned back, considering her question. "I think that's the beauty of it. There's no end point, no finish line. We keep going because there will always be someone who needs help, someone who deserves a second chance. And as long as we're here, we'll be ready to step up." His words resonated deeply with Maggie. She realized that what they had built wasn't just a series of programs or events. It was a mindset, a commitment to making the world a little brighter, one person at a time. A few weeks later, an unexpected visitor arrived at the diner. It was Mrs. Harper, Liam, and Noah's aunt. She approached Maggie with tears in her eyes, clutching an envelope. "I don't know how to thank you enough," she said, her voice trembling. "You saved my family. You gave those kids a future." Maggie shook her head, brushing away her own tears. "It wasn't just me. Everyone pitched in, Mr. Grayson, the community, even strangers who heard about the kids and wanted to help." Mrs. Harper nodded, handing her the envelope. "This is for you. Please take it. Use it however you need." Inside was a check, a generous donation intended to support the diner's ongoing efforts. Maggie was overwhelmed by the gesture, but she knew exactly what to do with it. She decided to expand their reach, partnering with nearby towns to establish similar programs. Word spread quickly, and soon, other communities began replicating the Cozy Corner model, creating networks of care and compassion across the region. Meanwhile, Mr. Grayson reconnected fully with his sister Clara. Their bond grew stronger with each passing day, and they spent hours reminiscing about their childhood, sharing stories they hadn't told anyone in decades. Inspired by Maggie's example, Clara joined forces with her brother to fund additional projects aimed at helping vulnerable families. Together, they formed a foundation dedicated to supporting education, housing, and healthcare initiatives. By summer, the Cozy Corner had become a household name. News outlets featured stories about the diner and its remarkable impact on the community. Strangers traveled from miles away just to experience the magic for themselves. Some came seeking refuge, others came to volunteer, and many simply came to witness the power of kindness in action. Through it all, Maggie remained grounded. She refused to let fame or recognition distract her from her mission. To her, success wasn't measured by headlines or accolades. It was measured by the smiles on people's faces, the hugs she received from grateful recipients, and the knowledge that she had made a difference, however small. One sunny afternoon, as she stood behind the counter watching the bustling crowd, Maggie felt a profound sense of peace. Life hadn't been easy, and challenges undoubtedly lay ahead. But surrounded by love, purpose, and the unwavering support of her newfound family, including Mr. Grayson, Clara, and countless others, she knew she was exactly where she was meant to be. As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting golden light over the diner, Maggie glanced at the mural on the wall. In its vibrant colors and intricate details, she saw reflections of her journey, the struggles, the triumphs, and the connections that had defined her life. And in that moment, she understood something profound. Kindness wasn't just an act. It was a ripple, spreading outward endlessly, touching hearts and changing lives in ways she might never fully comprehend. The story of the Cozy Corner, and of Maggie's boundless compassion, wasn't over. If anything, it was just beginning. For every meal served, every hand extended, and every heart touched planted seeds of hope that would continue to grow, shaping the future in ways no one could predict. And as long as there were people willing to care, to give, and to believe in the goodness of humanity, those ripples would never stop spreading.